based on the revelation of the ECZ final results, I will comply with the constitutional provisions for a peaceful transition of power.
On the 15th of August 2021, the people of the great nation of Zambia officially voted Edgar Chagwa Lungu out of office. But if I'm being honest, I believe a majority of Zambians had voted him out of their hearts quite some time before that. And while I joined the rest of the nation in celebrating the triumph of democracy, I became aware that even though I'd been under his leadership for 7 years, I had no idea who he was. And so I did what any media researcher does in the year 2021. I Googled him. And boy, what a timeline. According to Wikipedia, Edgar Chagwa Lungu was born on the 11th of November 1956 in my hometown of Ndola. While much of his early life went undocumented, he graduated from the University of Zambia in 1981 and joined Andre Masia and Company. Shortly after that, he underwent military training at Miltes in Kabwe under the Zambia National Service. After that, he returned to practicing law and his life goes quiet for a while. That was until 2010. In what should have been Zambia's first red flag, Edgar Lungu's practicing license was suspended after he was found guilty of professional misconduct. On 16th April 2009, the Legal Practitioners Committee of the Law Association of Zambia received a complaint from a Miss Wendy Kanyanta against Mr. Edgar Chagwa Lungu, claiming he had illegally obtained fees of 36,080 kwacha and 42 ngwe from a compensation meant for her, despite already being paid costs of 40,000 kwacha. Mr. Lungu's failure to inform his client in writing amounted to conduct unbefitting of a lawyer, and he was ordered to pay back that amount within 60 days from the 4th of March 2010 when the ruling was made, or face further disciplinary proceedings. In contravention of that very order, Mr. Lungu only paid 9,000 kwacha of the 36,080 kwacha and 42 ngwe, and this forced Ms. Kanyanta to sue in the subordinate court on the 6th of August 2010 for the balance of 27,080 kwacha, 42 ngwe. Mr. Lungu admitted guilt to the claim in court on the 19th of August 2010 and applied to settle the debt in installments. At that time, however, none of this mattered because no one was looking in his direction. Also, the very next year, a series of incidents happened that changed the course of both Zambian and African history forever. In the early hours of 23rd September 2011, Chief Justice Ernest Sakala announced that Michael Sata was the 5th president of the Republic of Zambia. After this win, Michael Sata appointed Edgar Lungu as junior minister in the vice president's office. Shortly thereafter, he was appointed to Minister of Home Affairs on 9th July 2012. He became Minister of Defense on the 24th December 2013 after Geoffrey Mwamba resigned from his ministerial post, and he functioned as acting president while President Michael Sata was ill from 2013 to 2014. Unfortunately, on the 28th of October, Michael Sata passed away, leaving both Zambia and the Patriotic Front in a power struggle. As mandated by the Constitution, Guy Scott, who had been the vice president during Michael Sata's tenure, became the acting president. And interestingly, one of the first dismissals he made was, that's right, you guessed it, Edgar Lungu. However, this dismissal only lasted for 24 hours and he was reinstated on the 4th of October 2014. 26 days later, Edgar Lungu was elected as president of the Patriotic Front at a national convention that the party held in Kabwe. However, this convention was unusual because no voting took place. Instead, the unaccredited delegates elected him by raising their hands. And so it came to pass that on the 20th of January 2015, Edgar Lungu contested the presidential by-election and beat his closest rival Hakainde Hichilema by a narrow majority of just 27,757 votes. He was declared the winner by the Electoral Commission of Zambia on 24th January 2015, and for me, that's when the real drama began. A month later, Edgar Lungu forced the head of the central bank out of office and promised lower interest rates. In 2015, Edgar Lungu collapsed while holding a speech commemorating International Women's Day in Lusaka. In October of that very year, Edgar Lungu took a page out of Frederick Chiluba's book and ordered a national day of prayer in hopes of preventing further damage to the economy. And this was just him finishing off Michael Satta's term of presidency, a period during which he claimed to be continuing Mr. Satta's legacy. Lungu ran for a full term in the August 2016 presidential election, which turned out to be a rematch of the 2015 presidential election between him and Hakainde Hichilema. Lungu won the election with 50.32% of the vote, just a few thousand voters over the threshold for avoiding a runoff. Mr. Hichilema, however, refused to concede defeat after the announcement of official results and filed a case before the Constitutional Court, asking for the results to be nullified due to irregularities. The court dismissed this case on 5th November 2016, and Edgar Lungu was inaugurated for a full 5-year term of office on 13th of September. In December 2019, Edgar Lungu expressed anti-LGBTQ rhetoric, comparing homosexual acts to bestiality, stating, and I quote, "Even animals don't do it. So why should we be forced to do it? Because we want to be seen as smart, civilized and advanced and so on?" End quote. I would probably need a whole other video to break down the timeline of Edgar Lungu's regime. So instead, I'll focus on 5 interesting scandals that occurred during the last 12 months of Edgar Lungu's presidency. The PF were quick to spot a good smear campaign in September 2020 when former Finance Minister Edith Nawakwi accused UPND leader Hakainde Hichilema of lining his own pockets during the privatization of state assets in the 1990s. Despite no evidence to support the claims and numerous previous inquiries clearing HH of any wrongdoing, President Lungu and the Patriotic Front dominated news outlets with calls for an inquiry into transactions that took place over 20 years ago. The fact that these claims surfaced at the same time as the hotly contested Lukasha and Mwansabombwe by-elections should give some indication of the Patriotic Front government's true motives. Hakainde Hichilema himself actually welcomed a government inquiry, not only into his own finances, but those of President Lungu's as well. The PF eventually dropped the issue after it had served its usefulness, leaving Zambians scratching their heads as to why they had even raised it in the first place. The PF government caused international uproar in April when the Independent Broadcasting Authority cancelled Prime Television's broadcasting license for refusing to air government messaging for free. The decision was roundly condemned by both the United States and the European Union, which called on the government to reinstate Prime TV's broadcasting rights in the name of freedom of speech. United States Assistant Secretary for Democracy, Human Rights and Labor Robert Destro said he was deeply troubled by the IBS decision and issued a warning to the Zambian government that, and I quote, "A free press is vital to democracy, especially during a pandemic." In June 2021, the ACC arrested the then health minister for possessing property suspected to be the proceeds of a crime. Prosecutors alleged that Chilufya had, on 4 separate occasions, used criminal money to acquire property, shares in a tourism firm, and a boat from the United Arab Emirates. He was eventually acquitted, but many civil society organizations questioned the efficacy of the Anti-Corruption Commission in bringing the case to trial. The hotly contested Lukasha by-election was overshadowed in September when stories emerged of politically motivated violence by PF thugs. Police in Kasama arrested 2 PF cadres for destroying a vehicle displaying support for UPND candidate Davis Mulenga. Previously, the PF campaign manager for Lukasha constituency, Brian Munduile, had instructed party heavies not to allow UPND leader Hakainde Hichilema to even enter the constituency. PF candidate George Tsanga eventually won the by-election, with Mr. Davis accusing him of stealing the vote. His claims were backed by MMD President Nevas Mumba, who said that PF had hired a South African IT firm to collect sensitive information on voters in Lukasha. Combining the 2 PF favorites of wanton political violence and the suppression of free speech, 2020 was marked with a string of savage attacks by PF thugs against radio stations who dared to broadcast messages from the opposition leader Hakainde Hichilema. One of the worst attacks was at ISO FM in Muchinga province, where 30 PF cadres overpowered security and assaulted the station. Staff were left fearing for their lives as the attackers threw a canister of unknown gas into the studio in an attempt to disrupt a live program in which HH was featured. Hakainde Hichilema described the attack as state-sponsored terrorism by PF and part of a wider PF campaign to shut down Zambia's free media. And then there were the gassing attacks. What started as a small event in Chingola district in Zambia's Copperbelt province, where unknown people started spraying unknown chemicals into people's homes, quickly spread to all parts of the country. Before I knew it, everybody was sleeping in shifts and vigilantes were lynching suspected gassers. So why am I telling you all this? Well, for 2 reasons. Firstly, in the last 7 years, I've been forced to become increasingly aware of the Zambian political landscape. I've been forced to learn names, faces, and political manifestos. I've been forced to wonder about tribe, about diligence, and where they both fit in the human condition. Secondly, I recently explored a documentary project called The Africans, A Triple Heritage by the late great Ali Mazrui. At the end of it, I realized the importance of Africans telling their own stories. And so I chose to tell you this one, so that whenever Africans are reduced to their knees by a regime, they can remember what happened in Zambia on the 12th of August 2021. To all my brothers and sisters across this great continent, a luta continua.
Sembe nenze msogoleri wa kino kyalo, sembe bantu bonse mzigo basekeramu, daily kutyera kulibogona njala, nipweza makuponi unga wa mahala, sembe vintu vonse muno vima flow, chipolopolo boys balekoluza bola, tiziba vuto latu tisachite udalo, imwe tikaleke kuchetekera kalo. Abena Zambia tikazichenjera, dawi yovota ikati ya bwera, chenti sanke bantu bamene baenera, osa konka chabe ukwalolo mwera. Abena Zambia tikazichenjera, dawi yovota na futi ya bwera, mukanivotera nizamisebenzera osa ibala.